In the 1920s and 1930s, literature of the poor working class became more and more prevalent in Sweden. One of the leading authors of that time was Ivar Lo-Johansson, 1901 to 1990, who was born in Ösmo, about half an hour by train from where I actually live today. Ivar Lo-Johansson described the life of the rural peasants. He criticized the social conditions and the extreme inequality in Swedish society. He's regarded as one of Sweden's greatest proletarian writers. Few of his titles are translated into English, and one of them is Only a Mother, Bara en mor, that came out in the original version in 1939 here in Sweden. In 1974, a collection of travelogues, among them Vagabond Life in France and a bunch of others, was republished in one big collection under the title Dagbok från 20-talet, Diary from the 20s. Well, 100 years have gone by since then, so much time, and on September 1, Natur och Kultur publisher released a book with exactly the same title, Diary from the 20s, about violence and lack of language skills. The author is Nicolas Lunabba from the city of Malmö in southern Sweden. Well, I read Nicolas's first book, Blir du ledsen om jag dör, last year, and it was one of the greatest non-fiction releases, one of the greatest successes also in recent years in Sweden in the non-fiction genre. Nicolas Lunabba is the director of a local NGO that is called Hela Malmö, which means the whole of Malmö or everybody in Malmö, an organization that was founded in 2004 and tries to help children and teenagers from poor and deprived families and backgrounds, many of them immigrants of the second generation. Malmö is the culturally most diverse city in Sweden, and like every other major cities, it has, in recent years, experienced a huge surge of crime and violence with, in comparison to other European countries at least, not to the United States, an enormous amount of shootings and killings. Last year, 62 people were shot to death, and even the summer of 2023 has been horrific, with 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds found dead in the woods, or boys of the same age as killers for the gangs, since they know that a person under 18 years in Sweden can get a maximum of 4 years in a juvenile care facility. This situation is in the focus of Lunabba's first book that was such a huge success that it will be published in English. Good news! It will be published in German, in Dutch, and a bunch of other languages in the spring next year, and even the TV rights for this book, for this non-fiction book, are sold. In the first book, Nicolas, or Nick as his friends call him, tells the story of himself and 3 boys he met while working socially for Hela Malmö. One of them is Elijah. He moves in with Nicolas and completely changes Nicolas's life, and he ends up alive and as a basketball pro, a sunshine history. But the other 2 boys became criminals and victims of violent crime. In the new book, The Diary from the 20s, Lunabba reports from the summer of 2022, another hot summer with a lot of shootings, when his first book was written and would soon be published. Nick has seen a lot of violence and death in his 42 years in Malmö, and his starting point is a situation when he and a friend were teenagers and they were walking down a street when a car stopped and the window opened and they looked into the barrel of a gun. An incident they survived. There were no shots, but about which he never actually talked about with his friend or with other people in his life. In Ivar Lo-Johansson's times of the 1920s, the poor and deprived were Swedish peasants. The country was anything but diverse, but in our days, a great number of people have migrated to Sweden. When I came here 28 years ago, the greatest second language of the country was Finnish, the language of the migrants that came in the 1960s and early 1970s, when the Swedish economy was in great need of working force to help change Sweden into one of the richest countries on earth. Finnish has easily been replaced by Arabic in the last 10 to 15 years. Many of them are the new peasants of the 2020s. Formerly a classical social democratic country, Sweden has changed, and the right-wing and xenophobic Sweden Democrats are currently in a very powerful position. They are not part of the government, but they are essential for its hold to power by voting with it. In 2022, the election campaign's main topic were the shootings. It was safety and security on the streets, and especially in the suburbs like Rinkeby, like Biskopsgården, like Fittja, and like Farsta, where I live. Suburbs that richer Swedes would never visit. During the election campaign, Lunabba writes in his diary, "In the run-up to the elections, the deterioration has broken out. Everything that was previously unthinkable to say in public about people of color is now being said openly. Most parties are engaged in a race to see who can come up with the most creative proposals to further degrade the lives of society's most vulnerable groups. It's a breathtaking display of spinelessness, of how quickly power corrupts the human soul, or in this case, almost the entire field in the current election campaign. In their desperate attempts to win over Sweden Democrat voters, the parties seem to have capitulated or been drained of self-confidence, either copying SD's rhetoric and policies or appearing delusional as if they have forgotten what they stand for and what their visions are. Like a cuckoo in an old-fashioned wall clock, they crow at the top of their lungs at 1:12. Lunabba writes from the bottom of society. He has no formal university degree or education. He received an honorary doctorate, actually, last year in social studies from the University of Malmö for his book and social activities. But Lunabba is an avid reader of modern literature, and he always wanted to be a writer. His language is sometimes raw. What he tells us is of a seldom seen honesty. When he reflects on a right-wing politician, he criticizes him for exploiting the poorest people as scapegoats to make himself a good living and a good life. And in the same sentence, he writes that he also lives from the poor in a different way, now as a more or less successful writer. Lunabba's language is also very beautiful and poetic. He has the capability of taking us into a scene, like if we were really there. A very young man is shot to death on a playground in Malmö, the day before the children of one of his best friends have played there. Lunabba writes, "The intimate experience of violence is not merely, as I tried to describe earlier in this diary, claustrophobically unpleasant, sticky and cold as a wetsuit, but rather like being thrown into a storm vortex, sucked into a black hole that shuts out all light and forces you to linger and endure and smell and see and feel the most insane and intense and dumb and undignified and evil of human experience. It is to stand in a square in a blue-collar neighborhood, eating ice cream on a hot summer day, to hear gunshots echoing through the adjacent yard and rushing in the direction of the blasts. To round the end of a house and see people hurrying to the playground and gathering next to a gently swaying swing, and what looks like a slumped human being to get close and look down at a boy's body, contorted in the most unnatural position. To see the blood pulsating and wetting the boy's clothes and running in rivulets into a rapidly disappearing puddle in a depression in the sandbox dune landscape. Language and the ability and inability to express feelings, added by the fact that many of the young men live in communities where masculinity is extremely high valued as a sign of strength and sometimes even power, is one of the reasons why so many young express themselves by being violent. Violence has become the language for those who cannot speak. We hear Lunabba once more. If it is difficult for us to convey our feelings, tell our story, who we really are, imagine how bad our parents have it. It's no wonder they are so disgustingly mute and shy and standoffish around Swedes, closed in on themselves. and, as you say, language less. Language is not just words. There is a kind of speciality in it that must be taken into account. A physical place, culture, history, social codes, layer upon layer of meaning, or however you want to explain it. Things that are so unspoken or implicit in the language. In addition to the depth of gratitude, in addition to the fact that racism and class play a role, adult people of color who came here late are linguistically inferior, without a chance in the meeting with Swedes. And this country uses it against them. They use their lack of language skills to infantilize our parents, to passivate them, to destroy them. And I understand how that happens. Dagbok från 20-talet, the diary of the 20s, gave me more insights and more understanding about our current situation in Sweden. I highly recommend you to read Will You Care If I Die, that will come out in English next year. Please put it on your TBR for 2024. Have you recommendations about similar books that write the history of our time and our societies from a similar perspective? Please notify me in the comments down below. I'm interested in all the countries, especially in the English-speaking countries. I'm always interested in that, really. If you like this video, please then slap me a like. And if you not subscribe yet to the channel, please do so. It won't hurt. It is not dangerous, and it doesn't even cost you a dime or a single penny. Thank you very much for watching this, and I hope to see you soon in another video. Bye.